So, I thought I'll tell you my story, which I don't know how interesting it is, but I'll tell it to you anyway. And if there's time left over, we can talk about, maybe management of thought, the way managers think, stuff like that. So, it's a funny thing. Okay, let me just back up for a minute. I grew up in a family where it was just a fact that as soon as I graduated from high school, I was going to college. There would be no break. There would be no questions asked. I was going to college. And so I actually started school in California. I was really young when I started school. So when I graduated from high school, I had just barely turned 17. And next thing I know, like 3 months later, I'm up at the University of Utah, and they said, hey, this is really cool. You can take the CLEP tests. You know what the CLEP tests are? Challenge your classes and that. In those days, you could take them all the same day. So I said, why not? I'll take the CLEP tests. And so I took the tests. And a couple weeks later, I got a letter in the mail saying, well, congratulations, you passed them all. Oh, good. So now you are a sophomore. I'm like, but I'm still only barely 17 years old, And so, so I'm a sophomore, and they're saying, so you have to declare your major at this point. Great. Okay, I don't know what my major is, but I knew what I wanted to be when I grew up. I wanted to be a forest ranger. And so I thought, easy, no problem, I'll be a forest ranger. And so I called my academic advisor. I said, okay, I want to be a forest ranger, so let's sign me up with a major that's going to get me a degree so I can get that job. And my advisor said, well, what major would that be? I said, I don't know, you're supposed to tell me that. And she didn't. So, and I was getting down, they were telling me, get done. So okay, well, I guess she said, pick something in the sciences. Well, okay, well, I like rocks. I'm a rock hound. So how about geology? And she says, well, okay, geology is good, but it's a 5-year degree. You want to be here for 5 years? I'm like, no. She said, you could do geological engineering and get that done in 4 years. So, okay, geological engineering. Like, what is it anyway? She said, I don't know. So anyway, I signed up for geological engineering. And so my first semester, I'm taking Calculus 1, computer science, which was, I had to learn to program in a language called Fortran 4. And then I had chemistry, and my other class was psychology or something. And no, it was anthropology. And so I had these classes, actually I had more than that because I had 15 hours. And I started into these classes, and I found myself after about 2 weeks realizing I hated my life. I hated everything about chemistry. I hated everything about calculus. I hated all these classes, and I had no aptitude for them whatsoever. And so I'm finding myself failing out of college my first semester. It was terrible. It was awful. And so I ended up bailing out of that, and sat down with my dad, and he says, you got to make a decision, I don't want to make a decision right now. I'm still 17. He said, well, what do you like to do? He says, you are a natural salesman, right? I hate being a salesman. I hate that kind of stuff. He says, yeah, but you're really good at it, so you should probably think about that. I said, so what degree do I have to get in order to be a salesman? He says, well, you should get a degree in business. So I look up the business thing, and it's like, that looks easy. And so I changed majors and became a business major. And sure enough, it was easy for me, the courses, and I understood things, accounting and finance and stuff like that, made sense. And so I went ahead and finished my degree, and I was about 20 years and 2 months old. I had 2 bachelor's degrees. Bachelor's degree in management and a bachelor's degree in marketing. And had a girlfriend, and she wanted to get married. So, I'm doing all this stuff. I'm just doing it all too fast, right? I mean, when you're that young and you're trying to go that fast, you don't even know what direction you're going, but you're going as fast as you can to get there. And so, anyway, get married, and got a job. I became a purchasing agent. I did not want to be a salesman, but I got a job as a purchasing agent for a company, local companies, family owned, and went to work. Well, it was okay. I enjoyed the work. It wasn't bad being a purchasing agent, but I wasn't making any money whatsoever. There was just no room to move in this company. The company had like 20 employees. And so, I hung around for about 3-4 years, I think, in that company. And then I was approached by actually one of the companies that I bought from. And they said, you ought to be a salesman. You too. And so anyway, this guy tells me, but he offered me a bunch of money to come be a salesman for him. So I said, okay, I'll come be a stupid salesman. And so I went off to become a salesman for a company in the printing industry. And back then, the printing industry was mostly business forms. Businesses, I mean, nowadays everything's done on the computer. Like your letterhead for your company, your colored letterhead, everything, you just print it off on your printer. But back then, you couldn't do that. You had all that stuff had to be pre-printed, and then you put it in your typewriter and type your letters or whatever, But companies used a lot of business forms. They used a lot of multiple part forms, carbon paper interleave. I was really good at designing forms like that. And I did really quite well in the printing industry, but I hated my life. I was selling it, and just exactly what I didn't want to do. And so I did that for a few years, and finally decided I was going to make my break. So I get out of the printing industry, and I had a degree in marketing, and I still do marketing. Marketing hadn't changed that much. So I went to work for a marketing company. At the time, it was called Nice Apex Direct Marketing, I think it was called. Anyway, shortly after I went to work for them, they changed their name to Matrix Marketing. And they were a big, like a call center place. And they would take orders over the phone, and then we would ship those orders. We had a big warehouse full of all of our clients' products, and we would just ship them out of the warehouse. So it kind of almost like an Amazon kind of thing. And I got a job in the warehouse area doing that kind of work, and they later changed their name, became what's now Convergys. But back at that time, it was enjoyable work for me. I enjoyed doing it. And as the business went, I moved up. What I ended up doing is managing every department in that warehouse. We had a letter shop where we prepared direct mail advertising, sorted it, sent it out in the mail. Where we did product fulfillment, where we had all the products that we put together and shipped those out. And it just, whatever customers wanted us to do, we would do it for them. Find a way and do it. And I was good at that. I was good at finding a way to do things, setting up production lines and that sort of thing, operations management, and did quite well doing that. I still went out on sales calls a lot of times with the telemarketing folks, because they would sell the telemarketing piece and then they wanted me around to sell the logistics and that side of it. So that was kind of fun too, as long as I didn't have to cold call. But anyways, I did that for a few years. Then the company sold my division. They sold it to a company that just did that kind of work, but it was located in Cincinnati. And they wanted to retain me here in Salt Lake to manage the Salt Lake operation completely. And so that's okay. I would do that. And I hung around for a while and was doing okay. We were still allied with Convergys, and so we were doing a lot of their fulfillment and everything. But this boss that I had, the guy was a lunatic. The guy who bought this company, it was so ridiculous. The guy was all emotion. He would get in meetings and he'd be so angry because he wasn't meeting his numbers or something, and he'd start punching holes in the walls, literally punching holes in walls during meetings. And behind his back, everybody was talking about how much they hated him and how much they hated working for him and how someone were scared of him. And it was a bad situation to be in, you know. It was just a horrible thing. But I was at the time, and there again, and he was paying me more money than I ever made in my life. And I was finally thinking, okay, you know, now I've got kids and all this stuff, all these responsibilities. I still want to be a forest ranger. And you know, I'd go up in the mountains and I'd see those forest rangers doing their jobs. And I was just jealous all the time. It was terrible. But I wound up being offered, I was recruited, this company for about 6 months recruited me to come up to Seattle and work doing basically the same thing for their company. And I thought, well, that doesn't sound too bad, Seattle. It rains a lot. But that's okay. So I finally took the job. So I didn't want to work for that lunatic anymore. And so I ended up moving up to Seattle, put my house up for sale. My wife was pregnant again. She quit her job. And I went up to Seattle. I was living in one of those extended stay places, you know, while she was down here doing all the work, trying to sell a house, all of the stuff that has to be done. And I had a house built up there, pretty cool. Getting more money again than I'd ever seen in my life. And on the day I was at, it was probably about 4 months I was having my house built up there. It's going flying back and forth. But on the day that I closed on selling my house here, and I was about to go over and sign the papers on the house that I'd had built, and they called me in and they said, well, you know, we've kind of changed our mind. We decided that we're going to close this facility here. And I'm like, wait a minute, what? Okay, so my wife's pregnant and she quit her job. So you're saying we sold our house. So we're homeless and jobless and pregnant. Good. Here's a good situation for you. This happens, you know, and I'm thinking at this point, I'm thinking, you know, this isn't working out the way I planned at all. And so I ended up having to come back and tell my wife what happened. And she was real happy. You know, it's one of those situations, life throws things at you when you don't expect it. Now, in the meantime, back up a minute. In the meantime, when I was still working at Matrix Marketing, they came out with a tuition reimbursement program. And so at that point, I went back to school again. This was 20 years after I graduated with my bachelor's degree that I graduated with an MBA. And which was, again, going back to school, learning more about business, it was almost like a review of my bachelor program. That's the funny thing about MBAs, because in an MBA, they take people with degrees in all sorts of bachelor's degrees. They don't have to be in business. They'll take people, in my program, I had engineers, I had pharmacists, I had people who had never taken a business class in their life. So the MBA program has to start them from scratch and bring them up to speed in business before they can get into the higher level stuff. So the whole thing's a review. And I'm going through, and so for 2 years I went to school, got my MBA, and so I was prepared that way. And in my MBA, I learned a lot of stuff about leadership that I had not learned before. Plus, in managing all these different departments that I had managed. When I first started out as a manager, I was a pretty emotional guy. I was the kind of guy who, if people would bring me a problem, I might snarl at them, or I might let it show on my face that I'm really annoyed by what's happening here. And those kinds of things are not the kind of thing that makes people have confidence that they can come in and talk to you about things, right? When people come to a leader and start looking, we've got a problem, we can't get this done, or I can't do this, I need help, whatever. The leader has to be comforting to the person, not making them feel like, oh, I never should have come in here in the first place, right? So that's one of the things that I learned, and it served me well as things went on. So here we were, and I'm using these skills on my wife, and I'm telling her, this is the situation we're in, and she's screaming. And I'm saying, it's gonna be okay, don't worry about it, we'll be fine. And it really was. It's a funny thing, because she's a good worker, she was able to go back to her workplace and say, you didn't want me to quit, right? No, we didn't want you to quit. Well, I'm back. And they said, great. So they took her back, that was good. We went to the bank and said, we sold our house, right? So we got a problem. We need another house. And this is something that you might want to think about too. We'd been with the same bank. It was a credit union, and we had been with them for the whole time we'd been married. And we had our mortgage through them. We'd always paid our mortgage on time and that sort of thing. So here I am coming into the bank with no job, with a pregnant wife, and saying, here's the situation we're in, and just laid it out for her. And you know what the loan officer said? He said, go buy a house. I said, wait, you didn't hear the part about me not having a job, right? And she said, you'll get a job. Wow, this is pretty cool. I didn't believe her. I wasn't sure, but she had more faith in me than I had in myself. And that's what comes from taking care of your obligations when you've got them and when you can't. So truth of the matter is that I did get another job, and we did buy another house right across the street from our old house that we had sold. We liked the neighborhood. We wanted to live there. So, then I ended up with another job. And the job I ended up with, when I was in my master's program, I was going to school. It turned out that my last teacher in that program was on a meteoric career path himself. And so like 2 years after I graduated, he was the provost of the university, the academic affairs provost. So he was in charge of all the academics. And he called me up one day and he said, you ever thought about teaching? yeah, I guess I can teach. He says, yeah. I said, but I don't know how prepared I am for that kind of work, you know. I don't have a doctorate or anything like that. I've never really taught other than a community education thing. I taught some electronics. And he's like, he says, you know what? He says, your whole career has prepared you for this. But he thought it had, because I'd been in school a lot. I had also done a lot of things and managed a lot, of, put myself in a lot of positions within companies. And he said, yeah, you're made for this. So I took it upon and I started teaching part-time to begin with, but real quickly there was a job that came open full-time and I jumped all over that. And they brought me on as the chair for a college for undergraduate business, and did that for a few years, and then got promoted, became the director of academic affairs, which was kind of like a provost. That was kind of cool. I did that for a few years too, and that kind of prepared me. While I was doing that, I took advantage of an opportunity to go back to school again and work on my doctorate. And so, and you know, the doctorate involves a couple of things. There's a bunch of coursework that you have to do, and then you have to write a dissertation. And a dissertation is a complete research project that you do. And so you have to do an exhaustive literature review, where you study literally every research article that's ever been written about the subject that you're trying to study. And you have to show that there's something missing in what we know from the work that's already been done. Taking into account all the work that anybody's ever done, you got to find something that we don't know. And then you put together a project that's going to help provide that knowledge, that little bit of knowledge. That's why, you know, they make jokes about these college students that are doing research about the sex life of a fruit fly or something. Well, the reason is because we already know so much about fruit flies. We got to find something we don't know in order to give these students a reason to write a dissertation. And so here's what I was going to do for my dissertation. Tell me if you think this is relevant. Have y'all ever heard the term workaholism? Okay. A guy by the name of Oates came up with the term. It's this propensity that some people have to basically work all the time, right? And by working all the time, that can mean a lot of things, but a lot of people, it's just putting in hours. For a lot of other people, it's being consumed with your work even when you're not at work. So people, you know, waking up in the middle of the night and run to their computer and do some work or something, or you know, sitting in a movie and jumping up and going out and making a phone call. But workaholism is something that's real, and it's becoming a bigger and bigger thing. And what I recognize is that companies were also kind of enabling workaholism, because suddenly there's all this new technology that's coming out. So we've got laptop computers, and we've got cell phones, and we've got things that keep us available and connected 24 hours a day. And some people are just eating this up. Some people love being connected 24 hours a day. I was never one of those people. I always have valued my free time. And my question was, if a person is a workaholic, the other thing that was happening is companies were saying, oh, even though we've given you all this equipment that's going to keep you tethered to us 24 hours a day, we know that you need to take your vacation for your mental health. So don't forget to take your vacation. Yeah, right. That's what they really want. Well, my question was, if somebody's a workaholic and they're working all the time, do they care? Or is this, I mean, companies are kind of assuming that people want to take their vacation and that sort of thing. But do they? Is this something that's real? And the impact, my program was in organizational leadership. And so to me, I can certainly tie this to leadership. If companies are going to a great deal of effort to make sure people take all their time off, is there a real payback for that? Is that in the best interest of the employee? Do the employees even care? And so that was my question. So I got together with a researcher who had put together a taxonomy of workaholic categories, like 4 categories of workaholism. And then another guy who came up with a scale for measuring satisfaction with your balance in life. So my idea was, okay, I take these people and I put them into their categories of workaholism, the 4 different categories. And I see, is there a difference in their happiness, is category 1 any less happy than category 2, that sort of thing. So we can help companies try to understand their employees better and be in a better position to keep the employees motivated and happy. We have to have a committee when you're doing a dissertation. And your committee is faculty members who are looking at your project and guiding you along the way and questioning you and that sort of thing. My committee was feigning ignorance. They were saying, well, we just don't see the tie-in between that and leadership. And I'm like, what, are you stupid? And they were jacking me around, which is what these dissertation committees do. That they're known for doing that. They jack people around. But I was at this point 50. I was like, I don't have time for you idiots to be jacking me around. I already got the promotion that I was going to get as soon as I got my doctorate. So guess what? And so I'm the guy. I've done 62 credits of doctoral coursework with a 3.98 GPA. I did throw my last class. I didn't want a 4.0. I thought that'd be too nerdy. So I took an A- in my last class, and I never finished my dissertation. So I'm ABD, all but dissertation. And I don't even care. So that's where I am now. I ended up here because the school that I was working for was one of the proprietary for-profit schools. It was University of Phoenix, and they were having big troubles at that time. There were a lot of things going on politically that were causing students to bail from the school, and so I did too. I just thought, well, there's probably not a lot of future here. It's a good thing I did, because the Utah campus has closed all of their, the whole University of Phoenix has closed all of their on-campus locations now. All they are is online, which, when I started, the on-campus outnumbered the online considerably. So things changed. But, so that's where I was. I came over here. They had an opening. And so I jumped in as the associate dean for accounting, finance, and paralegal studies. And that's what I am to this day. I've been here 8 years. And I enjoy it. I really like this school. I like the students here. You guys are great. You're a great student body. And I feel like here we can help people, we make a difference in people's lives, and that's what motivates me at this point. Although I really, really want to be a forest ranger. I do. I was up hiking up the Ruby Ridge Trail a few years ago, and there was this forest ranger riding along on a horse and going from lake to lake, and just talking to the people along the way. I thought, man, that should be my life, not his. Well, here I am. So what have I learned along the way? Well, I already told you one thing I learned. Now, it's a funny thing about emotion, because everybody has emotions. And when you're making decisions, they say you're making a big business decision, you leave your emotions out of it. Is that right? Answers? Come on, speak up. Why is it not right? So I hear that you're shaking your head.
Because we're human.
Okay, we're human, right? And when you think about the decisions you make in your life, if you think of the 5 most important decisions you've made in your life, I'll bet you at least 4 of them were based mostly on emotion, right? Who you marry, what kind of a car you finally choose, where you're going to live, you know, these kinds of things tend to be very emotional decisions. And so somehow emotion's always going to be there, right? So what do we do if we're in business and we need to make decisions? Hard decisions. And they're emotional. What do you do? How do you deal with it? How do you not blow up? How do you? Difficult thing, isn't it? First thing you got to do is train yourself not to blow up, right? Take a deep breath. What else? What else can you do? You guys have heard the term critical thinking, right? What does critical thinking mean? Does it mean looking at problems from as many different angles as you can think of? Trying to figure out what's important, what's relevant, what's not relevant, what the impacts of the problem are, that sort of. Okay, so these are the things that you do. You could be emotionally invested. You can care very much about what happens, but if you know that you're going to approach this thing critically and think it through and make a good decision that way, this is what a leader does. I mean, nothing would be worse than walking into your leader with a problem and having the leader blow up and punch a hole in the wall, right? What makes a good leader? I've asked that question before. What makes a good leader?
Being able to like accept responsibility for something, like some actions that you do.
That's a big thing, isn't it?
Trying to figure out a way to fix what happened.
Yeah, exactly. You know, that's a huge thing. You know, I took a class from a guy back in my bachelor's degree days, and he said, a piece of advice he gave us was never take the blame. If somebody comes in and starts throwing down on you, don't take blame. Blame it on anything else, anybody else. Never take the blame. It's a bad thing to take the blame, makes you look weak, don't do it. It's probably the worst piece of advice I've ever been given. And so I as a leader, I mean, everything I've read as far as, you know, leadership studies, that big book I had, I wasn't kidding. I read every study in that book. And taking responsibility for your actions is one of the things that a lot of people have said they really, really respect in a leader. I don't think anybody ever said, what I respect about him is that he doesn't take the blame for anything. What else makes a good leader? A good leader. Okay. Think about that. Now, back in the late 60s, there was three guys, George Odiorn, Tom Peters, and Peter Drucker. And they were management experts. And they came up with a whole new theory of management or practice. They called it management by objectives. And management by objectives is still being used a lot today. It's the ones where you go in and you sit down with your manager and you set all your goals, and then you have to come back in 6 months and talk about whether you can make your goals, this sort of thing. That's all, it all comes out of management by objectives. But one of the things that mostly Tom Peters kept pointing out is there's a huge difference between managers and leaders. Yes, you guys have probably heard all this, right? Anyone here not heard people talk about the difference between managers and leaders? You haven't heard that? Okay, good. I'm glad. Because I reject that. They'll talk about, you see them all the time, comparison charts. Managers, do things right. Leaders do the right thing. Things like this that trying to differentiate between a manager and a leader and making the manager look like a mindless drone, whereas the leader looks like savior of humanity. And so I look at that. Now, I've been teaching management for the last 20 years. And every management textbook I've ever read really breaks down management into 4 categories, right? 4 areas of management. There's planning. Planning is, coming up with your strategic plan, setting your objectives, that sort of thing. There's organizing. Organizing means creating a system that's going to work, made up of people and equipment and that sort of thing. That's organizing. Controlling. Now, controlling doesn't mean control in terms of making people do what they do. Controlling means understanding what's going on within the organization. So it's mostly information. So controlling would be accounting, giving you your accounting statements so you can read them and you can see where you might be off base or whatever. It's any kind of report that you may get that's going to help you understand what's going on within your business so that you can make adjustments. That's what controlling is. And then the 4th thing is leading. So planning, organizing, leading, and controlling are the 4 functions of management. So if you're a good leader, great. That's 1/4 of being a manager, right? But if you're a good manager, you're good at 4 different areas, including leadership. So to me, management, when you study management in school, you're going to be learning all those different areas. You need to learn them all well. And I've always been proud of being a manager because, that includes being a leader. If I'm a good manager, but a bad leader, I'm really not a good manager, am I? Okay, let's see. We can probably take questions. We only have about 10 minutes left. So, any questions for me? My kids all grew up. Grandkids now. Yes.
Were you working full time while you were doing your MBA?
Yes, I was.
What was that
And I had my second child during my MBA program. I picked a program that I only went to school one night a week. And so I did that, and then the rest of the time was just managing to do homework. And it worked out. It was okay. My doctoral program was a lot worse because there was so much more work to do. And so what I ended up doing then, my youngest child at that time was about 2 years old. And I would come home from work, eat dinner, and play with my kid for a little while, and put him to bed. And I'd lay down next to him and go to sleep at about 7 o'clock. And at midnight, I'd get up and I would go and do my homework until about 4. And then I'd go back to sleep for a couple hours and go to work. And I did that for 2 years. Just the way it is. If I were a single parent, couldn't have done it. At least not that way. Would have been more creative. What else? Okay, so what's a success? Am I a success? One has to define success their own way, don't they? And I would say I'm successful in some parts of my life. I don't know that I am in all of them. I'm not a forest ranger. And I really want to be. Okay. I've done okay. I'll get to retire and I'll have enough money to live on when I retire. It'll be okay. So I guess that way it's success. Got great grandkids. My own kids suck, but their kids are great.
Looking back over your career, would you have changed any of your decision making? Possibly you wanted to become a forest ranger. You didn't talk about the pay scale of a forest ranger.
Yeah.
Very much.
Yeah, well, the
Would
pace,
that have changed your view of that profession?
no, because I was aware of it at the time. Forest rangers don't get rich.
No.
At least not from being forest rangers, unless they make a huge drug bust and can cash in on that. But not that, just kidding. They don't. But to me, success has never been measured monetarily. There have been a lot of ways that I could have made a lot more money than I ever did, but I've always valued, I mean, those times back when I was a salesman and I was barely scraping by because I hated my job. I was having more fun. I was racing dirt bikes. I was fishing all the time. I was having a great time. And I forgot to mention, I did get divorced in there because I got married way too young. And so for about a dozen years or so, I was just a motorcycle racing, fishing, don't care about anything guy. So yeah, am I a success? I don't know. I managed to pull it all together after all those years were passed. Then I started saving money and making money and putting it away. Okay.
But just one other question or comment is that many people who have come through this program and talked in here, there's not many of them who have had that solid foundation of this is what I want to be. They've had goals, but nearly all of them, that has changed.
Yeah.
And they've had to adapt somewhere because of circumstance with family or finance or whatever it is.
Well, yeah.
And their life becomes much different than what maybe they envisioned at 18. They may have had this vision of school, work, good job, home, and follow through, but rarely does that fall into place the way. we think
That's for
it's
sure.
going to.
That's for sure. And, you know, if I had envisioned, even once I knew I was going into business, if I had tried to envision the path I would eventually take, no, it wouldn't even been close. You kind of follow where the path leads. Here's the thing though, and I'm thinking about getting a couple here who's a power couple. Okay, these people are in their early 20s and they're killing it. They're killing it on the internet. They're making money, they're having fun, they're doing everything that it was never available to me, but they're following opportunities as they present themselves. And it's really kind of fun to watch. I'm thinking about having them come in. So you'd be having somebody standing in front of you that's your age and saying, you can do this. Because you can. But yeah, they don't. Can't go where they're going. So where are you guys gonna go? Anyone know where they're gonna go yet? Got their minds made up? You do? You want to share or no? You don't have to.
Well, I was really young when I got my real estate license, so that's my plan, just to grow from there and maybe get into development.
My brother's daughter started in real estate about 15 years ago and she and her husband started borrowing money and buying investment homes. And they managed to, they've got 18 houses paid off now and they're 40. It's just crazy. And yeah, they're raking it in. She's also the top agent in Omaha. Works hard, does a good job. What else? Anybody else? Any ideas? Oh, by the way, she started out working for like an ADT kind of company.
Yeah,
You
I
know?
started at Keller Williams. I'm
Yeah.
still there,
Okay,
but I'm not solo anymore. I'm with the Stern team. The
okay.
Stern team is one of the biggest teams in Utah.
Uh-huh.
So I think that was a major accomplishment that they hired me, because they don't hire just anyone. But I think I'm on a good track. I like where I'm at.
Well, that's great. That's good. Get a good head start that way. Don't forget to have some fun.
Yeah, we work hard, play hard, for
Good.
sure.
Good.
You know how sales are, sales is.
Yeah.
You make a lot of money. So.
Yep. May as well have fun with it. Okay. All right, guys. Time's up. Thanks.